Welcome, everyone. I'm Angelo Robles, host of the Angelo Robles podcast and the founder at Family Office Association. Today, we have Robin Williams' son, Zach, on the intersection of mental health and breakthrough tech and the metaverse. We have a lot to cover today. Our special guest, no surprise, he's in the title. That would be Zach Williams. He's the CEO and founder of PYM. We'll get to that and that interaction with our conversation today, but I'll start with Zach. It's been a couple of years. Welcome to the show.
Angelo, thanks for having me. It's great to see you again. I had the great privilege of being able to speak at a family office event a couple of years ago, and it was such a great experience that I'm back. Here we are.
Yes, you are. And for everyone, that was probably about 3, maybe 4 years ago now, and that was in Napa. So very hard to forget. The name of the location was the Carneros Inn. Hopefully they're still there. It was a beautiful location. We really enjoyed our time and the opportunity for you to be so warm-hearted and engaging with your time and sensitivity and emotions with the group, especially at that time with the death of Robin was not too far removed from that. So we do appreciate your time, which really, I think the audience wants me to get right to it. So I will. And we preambled a little bit about this in the prior couple of minutes. And that really is what I'm going to say is the intersection of physical health, which I think we're all familiar with now. It's good for you. Physical health, you want to be on top of it. But we tend, maybe more so people in my generation, to not be as educated on the value of our mental health. As I've gotten more familiar with much of this in the last couple of months, I now realize the importance of mental health balanced with physical health, probably on a 1-to-1 ratio, if not even more. If you're putting in time and effort to what you eat and your exercise, you need to put equal time, if not more, into what I'm going to call your mental health wellness. Why don't I give that to you to run with?
It's a great primer for a fantastic conversation. So I see mental health and the health of the rest of the body as inextricably related because at this point, the lens I take is a precision mental health model. And really what that means is for any given individual, there's a collection of experiences that work best for them. That's not just finding a panacea and a magic pill like, a pharmaceutical product that can solve all your problems. That may be a part of it, but really what it looks like is managing fitness, nutrition, having potentially a mindfulness meditation practice, combine that with potential things like therapy, CBT and the like. And really what it comes down to is fitness, nutrition, these type of things. They help manage your body's processes, but in turn, through a number of different processes, but one of the main ones is through a neuroendocrine relationship. It relates to how you ultimately feel and your mindset and your mood and all these different other considerations. So, the precision model takes into account how the rest of your body is doing as it ultimately has a beneficial effect on your brain and your brain's health when you're taking care of yourself on a systems level.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I would probably add to it, and I think my audience knows I've been very active in my physical health perspective. And I still get people that will send me messages like, I don't know if I really see that in looking at your images and the YouTube videos. There's something about my camera and the angle that definitely does not play to my benefit. One day I'll correct that. But my bigger picture point is before I really get started, let me have. And yes, you want to be self-educated. It's good to hack things. It's good to, move fast and break things as you go along. I am all on board on that. But these are really important issues that understanding there's professionals, just like in health and wellness, you probably should get your heart checked out before you start to go on a rigorous program. You probably should get a really, really good trainer. And you may not need that forever. You may need that for 30 days, but you want to have a strong foundation. So before I would say people jump nothing wrong. Mindfulness, meditation, cold water plunges, saunas, all those things potentially could be beneficial from a health and a mental health perspective, but maybe there is value in case there may be an underlying issue in getting assessed from a professional. There tends to be a negative stigma with that, more so with, again, the older, my generation, and that's really wrong.
Well, I think, and this is again breaking it down on a systems level, there's layers to mental health, right? And the lens that I generally take is balance out your body's neurotransmitter health. That very much relates to the neuroendocrine system and the like, before you really take an opportunity to focus on things like trauma, lived experience, and the like, because if you're not coming from a good foundation, then it's hard to have the clarity, focused, and ultimately proactive mindset to then focus on really breaking down that stuff that's built up over the years. So yeah, I think many people, most everyone would benefit from checking in with a mental health care provider, even if it doesn't involve a regular practice. But really what it comes down to, from my perspective, is seeing your body and brain as inextricably related and saying, hey, I'm experiencing X, Y, and Z. Yes, I can directly deal with that issue, but there's all sorts of other associated issues that can be determined and teased out when you speak with a practitioner, whether it's a mental health care practitioner or, other types of practitioners. There's this spectrum that you can really get to the heart of. There's a when it comes to a problem, there's a spectrum of dealing with it that you can tackle from many different ways to decisively manage the situation.
I mean, not having it assessed and optimized relative for you, because we all may have various imbalances that could be treated, or other aspects that, again, professionals could be of value to. You're not optimizing your life. In my role at Family Office Association, I know many entrepreneurs that are billionaires. Some of them are happy and have great family lives, and some of them are miserable. Many of them that I'm noticing more than ever are willing to open up about the challenges that they have. Money does not make these issues go away. They may even be an accelerant, especially maybe more so to the children of very affluent families of prominent celebrities, etc. And yes, they may not have the challenge and the burden of food and shelter. And of course, that's a great thing. But there's other challenges that may present itself that are underlying, that money may even just bring out even more. I suppose my question still goes back to, how do we best approach the stigma, and I want to say discrimination, against or surrounding mental illness, mental health?
Sure. That's a great question. I first want to address entrepreneurs and mental health in that relationship, because it's very related. Many times, from my experience, both with friends, but also extended network and the like, I've seen entrepreneurs become jet engines. They're very specialized in building a lot of value, both for their shareholders, but also for, potentially their customer. They're not necessarily oriented around building value for themselves in terms of, mental health and the like. And that penalty can accrue over time if it's not identified early on, because you can get to a point when you achieve, and then suddenly it's like, okay, I have all this money, then what, right? So that jet engine is optimized for building value, not necessarily for building that foundation for oneself. So I just want to call that out. Relative to the stigma of mental health, I really see it as breaking it down into a collection of biases that we have. And these biases can be very useful to a point, but ultimately they end up creating inertia or resistance to wanting to change, to adopting new models and modalities of taking care of oneself and others. And I've noticed it amongst different generations, the bias is different. That collection of biases that make up openness to learn new things,
For sure.
openness to adopt new models. And that's really what the stigma is. It's a collection of biases that ultimately can be hard to change, because in many ways they make up our belief systems. And you change someone's belief systems, and you have a chance to actually alter what they perceive as their identity, right? And that's when it gets scary for people. There's fear there. You break down the stigma, it potentially reduces or de-weights biases, and then you're in a situation where, oh wow, my belief system is challenged. Now what? I'm uncomfortable. I'm not in a situation where I necessarily know the right answer. There's not a black and white scenario, and that can be hard to manage. So when it comes to dealing with stigma, I think, and research does corroborate this, I really think there's some incredible work done at the University of Indiana around socio-medical relationships with, the socio-medical pursuit of studying stigma. But what's been discovered is that it requires really dealing with the issue from a bunch of different lenses, from culture, from policy, from private sector, governance adoption. I mean, there's a bunch of different things that need to be done. And really what it comes down to is making sure that you can break down those biases without getting people to feel uncomfortable around how it might be changing their belief system and ultimately identity.
Yeah, I mean, I look at the era that was closer to me and your father, Robin. It was just simply different back then. And even with you being in the middle, and I have a teenager, and they're learning about this in high school now, and maybe even middle school, and that's great. It's part of their health curriculum to be understanding of it, to be more forward. And you have issues that may have arisen later being addressed more, depending on their interaction with the school and their parents. I'm going to phrase my question. Did you go to college, Zach?
I did go to college. I went to undergrad at NYU.
Oh, of course. Great
yeah,
school in my backyard.
Yeah, I went to undergrad at NYU. I started in September of 2001, actually late August of 2001, which is an interesting time to start living in New York. And then I went to graduate school at Columbia, where I received my MBA.
Like to see those New York roots, at least from the college perspective. So maybe I'll use you as a little bit of an example, and maybe it was different relative to your upbringing, which was unique with a celebrity dad. But the culture shock, I would assume, of getting away from home and going to college, in your case, I'm assuming thousands of miles away from the home base in California, and the independence, the excitement, but also perhaps anxiety and fear. Some of the things that we're talking about right now, including those things, maybe lack of clarity and focus, what you wanted to do, who you wanted to be, who you wanted to become, a sense of anxiety over the unknown. How did you personally address these issues?
Well, I started undergraduate education at a very unique time over the past few decades. It was right before the September 11th attacks.
In New York.
In New York, right. And so my experience in starting school was one of having a complete world-changing disruption impact you very personally, because you move to a new place, there's a lot of unknowns, there's a lot of fear, and then your world's turned upside down. And so for me, it was very unsettling and dysregulating, but there was also coinciding with that some unrecognized trauma. If you're an 18-year-old and you're starting school and then suddenly this thing happens, you're living in downtown New York and you're displaced and you get sick because of the air and smoke, and your friends know people who were in the buildings. I mean, there's just a lot there. And so that was my introduction to, adulthood, I guess you could say. So, and only in hindsight, I think I realized there was some unrecognized trauma that I kind of glossed over and didn't really go through. And I also realized that there's a lot of adaptation that occurred. That's living in a post 9/11 New York that ultimately carried with me beyond its usefulness, hypervigilance, and all these different considerations. So yeah, there was fear and uncertainty and all sorts of other things happening. But I had the great opportunity to spend many years in New York. I live in Los Angeles now, and I love it, but I do miss New York at times.
How does the spirit of Robin Williams live on in all of us, including myself, who have enjoyed his comedy and his movies, some of them not even comedic, very serious movies? He became a very great dramatic actor. How does that spirit of Robin live on in those? I mean, I guess I could perhaps answer it from my perspective, but from you being his son and the people that approach you, what are like some of the things you heard that makes you really feel good?
Well, I have people reach out on a daily basis, essentially at this point, around how my father has impacted their experience. And it's universally positive. I would say my dad stood for two things. And this is really what he wanted to share with the world. He wanted to help people learn, and he wanted to help people laugh. That's the two most important things for him. That's what he lived for. And he went about it in a bunch of different ways, through dramatic means, through comedic means, through stand-up. And the message that he really delivered, or the message that stuck with me, I'd say over time, was that he really wanted me to really seek and be kind at every opportunity, or seek to be kind at every opportunity. And I didn't have kids while he was alive, but the legacy that I seek to carry on is trying to educate my kids around being kind, being good people. And that's the legacy that we want to continue. I carry the legacy on personally in a bit of a different manner. The big thing for me is that service is a path to happiness. That's what I stand for. And my dad stood for that in a different way. He wanted to teach people and he wanted to make them laugh, and that was his own form of service. So, that's how it's carried on generationally. And my kids, I'm hoping, will have their own interpretation of what that legacy looks like.
Of course, and they will. How important is establishing daily rituals, routines to support the mind and overall well-being for most individuals?
Well, I'm a big advocate for mental health hygiene. And really what that looks like is it's not, again, just taking a pill or just one thing to manage your well-being. I'm not against pharmaceuticals or by any means. I'm actually quite for them. But I'm really, really passionate about advocating for that hygiene ritual. That means not just applying a set of experiences and activity to support oneself. So for me personally, get up in the morning, I engage in a gratitude exercise that grounds me in what I'm appreciative of and gives me a great heading for the day. I'm a firm believer that exercise is excellent for mental health. From a neuroendocrine perspective, it's great for endorphins, but it has an impact on the catecholamine system, a secondary impact on serotonin synthesis, all these benefits that help you have clarity, be balanced, and the like. Coinciding with that, nutrition, absolutely essential. When I eat poorly, I experience the detrimental effects almost immediately. But with my company, what we're focusing on and what we're seeking to define the category around is nutritional psychiatry. So that's very important to what we do. How do you leverage nutrition to generate optimal neurotransmitter health? And then you have the therapy, alternative protocols that I'm for, but aren't part of a daily ritual, but are effective, potentially things like psychedelics, very helpful for things like treatment-resistant depression and the like. That's not part of the ritual, but it's part of an extended opportunity to help people. If you're taking psychedelics every day as part of your mental health hygiene ritual, then I would potentially be concerned. But the toolkit is expanding. So fitness, nutrition, mindfulness, meditation, gratitude exercises, community support, therapy, CBT, EMDR, all of the things together make up that balanced mosaic for somebody.
And actually, you kind of beat me to the punch of what was going to be my next question, but I'll still ask it because it'll be a little bit more direct. Will psychedelics, yeah, that was my next question. Will psychedelics play part in the mental health treatment? I was going to say the future, but possibly the current right now.
Yeah, I'm an advocate for psychedelics. They can be transformational. There's different protocols that are able to manage very resistant issues that people have. But the key thing is can we invest in the research at the same pace as commercialization, right? Or, invest even potentially at a greater pace than commercialization, would say. Because emerging treatments around psilocybin, they can deal with everything from migraines to end-of-life mental health issues, hospice, and dealing with kind of the issues associated with coming to terms with mortality. That's a very psychedelic-oriented issue. But psilocybin also effective for things like alcohol addiction, treatment for that, and treatment-resistant depression. MDMA for trauma. They're just past stage 3 trials with veterans around managing PTSD. Incredible opportunities there. Ketamine, already widely commercialized, but has been shown to be very effective for treatment-resistant depression. And it goes on and on. DMT, plant medicine. The key thing is how can we support the scientific community in doing the research and applying the clinical and scientific rigor that enables us to say, hey, there's this new class of products that's emerging that can be transformative for people. But you don't want to just give somebody a psychedelic and say, okay, call me in a week. This is about integration. This is about a guided protocol. You work with practitioners, and in the mental health space, it's called an adjunct experience. So, how do you combine psychedelics and CBT? How do you combine protocols with one another to create better medical outcomes? That's really what we want to advocate for. So psychedelics are just an expansion of the toolkit, a very effective expansion, but one that should be applied with jurisprudence.
For sure. I kind of asked it indirectly with you when you transitioned to college. And yeah, that was during the advent, a week or two later of 9/11. But in general, how can our youth deal with what appears to be increasing social anxiety? Part of it during or spurred by COVID, part of it issues that may be important to them, social justice, climate change, maybe fear relative to, is AI and technology going to take jobs? What does my future look like? Do I have the burden of living up to my parents? I mean, this generation has a lot on them.
Well, there's a lot happening on a societal level and on an economic level that's leading questions to be asked around career path and stability that might not have been asked 30 years ago by most people when they were going through transition phases, say from adolescence to adulthood. Mm-hmm. There's not, the 30, 40-year career trajectory through a company, advancing through the ranks and, retiring with the expectation of a stable pension. This is something that there's uncertainty around at this point. There's more opportunity than ever with things like crypto and, AI that actually provides enablement opportunities, but without the education there, it's, if people aren't skilled up and aren't consistently brought up to speed with how emerging technology can unlock productivity, can empower creativity, can provide all these opportunities, then we're at a detriment. And I'm really worried about younger generations. Yes, they're able to be very savvy in adopting new emerging forms of technology. They're mobile first in a lot of in how they think about work and things like that, which is great. But it creates it creates all this. It creates a new set of challenges in the sense that there is a over-reliance upon technology, which is a double-edged sword. It can create all these mental health issues. The FOMO consideration, the fact that young people are wired into TikTok. They're using these platforms and they're learning a lot from it. There's actually a lot of education that can be had in some respects, and it's also a lot of garbage out there, but they're wired into it. These platforms are created to generate dopamine, or optimized to generate dopamine within your system. And so it doesn't promote focus, potentially productive flow, and all these different things. Yes, that can be established through other means, but
right,
it's very disruptive, right? So, there's all these opportunities for learning, new pathways of education, openness to finding kind of agility in career, saying taking an opportunity for a year or two here, 6 months for a project, jumping, maybe, following a company through, startup to IPO, what have you. But it's not this linear path that previous generations generally experience. It's a little bit more accelerated. So I'm very hopeful. I think Gen Z has all these traits that I'm speaking in aggregate, but I think Gen Z has all these traits that are very advantageous towards having productive careers. But, we need to embrace the values that enable them to thrive. Also, and I'll be perfectly frank here, be clear on expectations and the like, because often, there is this emerging idea that the modern company, the modern startup that's appealing to younger people, has this set of approaches, guidelines, whether it's remote work or the hybrid model, things like that. And that's fine, but there needs to be reconciliation around what's best, because, Gen Z will assimilate in some way with other generations. It just so happens at this point that they're very new to the job sector. So there's all this stuff that's happening, and the pandemic accelerated all these traits. So I believe there will be a reversion. It's just a question of what that reversion looks like. I think it'll settle pretty much to a hybrid model around working and, how people actually think about balancing work and life, etc.
Yeah, I agree with you and maybe disagree a little bit. I actually wonder if the younger millennials in Generation Z, if we're going to need to assimilate more to them as they come into a position of authority, being creators, being very active in technology. You mentioned cryptocurrency, the advent of a new world order, a decentralized world, which is coming, and their fluency with technology. And eventually they're going to be the people hiring people. They're going to be our political leaders. And we're a couple of years away from that, but among maybe the younger to mid millennials, we're starting to see them come in, and they're very different than Gen Z. Oh, some similarities. I'm going to try to bring mental health into it, but we may divert a little bit from it, and then we'll bring it back into something that we're both interested in.
Yeah.
And we discussed offline, and that was what we call the digital asset ecosystem. We're not going to talk as much today, don't worry, audience, about cryptocurrencies, but we are going to discuss parts of that community, mainly the metaverse. And many of you that have teenagers are going to be familiar with games like Roblox, Minecraft, definitely Fortnite, especially a year or two ago, and all these virtual worlds where the technologies are coming together. Why don't I let you expound upon that? And then from your responses, I definitely have follow-up questions.
So Angelo, I just want to say that we reconcile our mindset around how millennials and the like need to assimilate to Gen Z. I agree with you. I think that, we also need to find opportunities to meet somewhere in between. Gen Z needs to find opportunities for assimilation, just while millennial and other generations need to assimilate to new paradigms of work and distribution models and things like that. So we're fully on the same page. I just want to be clear on that.
For sure.
In terms of blockchain and opportunities, I mean, decentralization, whether you want to call it decentralized finance, I'm a firm believer that we will be embracing decentralized capitalism in so many different ways moving forward, because it provides so much opportunity to generate value and equity for people who might not have seen the opportunity in previous eras. It's just the elements of disintermediation combined with new opportunities for value accretion, whether it's with NFTs, tokens. I'm really bullish on what's going on with staking and bonding and the like. It's generating more diversity in how people can establish value, and also coinciding with that, providing opportunities for communities to get together and generate value together. That's not unprecedented, but it's new. The modalities are new. Distributed autonomous organizations are enormously disruptive when it comes to investing, when it comes to coordinating as a community, and when it comes to governance models. There are challenges associated with it. I joked with a friend the other day that the DAO is the new HOA. And, I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think that there can be a situation where you have very unwieldy governance organizations, but I think, we're at a time of experimentation. We're seeing more experimentation. At least I'm seeing more experimentation around technology and new experiences and products than I've seen in my lifetime, only in the past 12 months. And it's tuning the dials. It's figuring out what's working. These big unwieldy DAOs, hard to manage. Maybe they'll work in the longer run, but there's probably new models that will emerge from learnings. So, we're in the very early phases, and there is some really interesting, unique opportunities at the intersection of mental health and Web3, which is crypto, smart contracts, DeFi, and all sorts of other associated things.
Yeah, you bring up a lot there. And I don't want to make it too technical of a conversation. We'll tie in the human interaction and the mental health to it. But again, in my perch and what I see globally, and that's the whole thing too, is today's world is so interconnected. where even in gaming, where again, a lot of the young ones and even me are going to be somewhat active, it's not like you just play against a game or you have a friend over and playing against a friend. That's kind of old news, probably years ago. You're playing against someone from around the world and you don't know what they look like. You're starting to see, even in the NFT community and on Twitter and finance, a lot of people that want to be anonymous, known as anon. So they create an NFT that may be an image of their perception. I remember we had a guest on a couple of days ago, a very prominent person that told a story relative to a child being a teenager, that was maybe a little socially awkward and starting to come out of their shell. But when they create an avatar in a game, it's like a superhero and it gives them that social status that maybe they yearn for, but they're not getting now. So, and that probably could tie into mental health. So how does issues like I described, being anonymous, creating avatars, is our avatar going to be our image of the future, connecting with people around the world through the metaverse? Is that good, or could that also be a little dangerous?
Well, I think in many ways it's awesome. It's great. And in many ways, it's going to lead to some challenges. The avatar is a mask. It is a layer of depersonalization that can be really great for some people. It enables them to come out of their shell, establish a personality that they've always wanted. It might boost self-esteem, give them an opportunity to take on a persona that they feel is truer to what the persona is that they developed through their upbringing. I see it all the time. I interact with anons all through the crypto community and through the mental health community, actually on a daily basis at this point. It's interesting because now you have anon investors, you have anon funds.
Yes.
And, it's great for, because these people, I feel, are finding opportunities to really express themselves in ways that feel true to them. I think where you're going to run into some challenges is when you're actually seeking intimacy, when you're seeking more, well, intimacy might not be the best word for it, but when you're seeking a deeper connection, whether it's in person or through some sort of interaction that goes beyond, a WhatsApp community or Discord or Twitter, and you're actually saying, okay, I want to interact with you. You can maintain a personality through an avatar, through Zoom and all these things. But if you're sitting across from a person and you're really seeking to get to know someone, it can be challenging, especially, I think in the business world, it creates some unique challenges. You can have an anon investor, you can have a DAO invest in you, and this can be great. But if you're seeking to connect with someone and sit down and go over challenging problems, that requires a demasking, and not everyone will be up for that. And the question is, how do we manage these alter egos? I think a very lightweight case that I've experienced personally is, say, with collecting, NFT collecting and the like. You have wallets, you have OpenSea accounts, and they're generally pseudonyms, right? And you collect through it, and it's kind of fun because you've got a pseudonym.
Yacht Club.
Yeah.
Punks.
well, but you're as a collector, you generally generate a pseudonym because it benefits you, and you can have people send to your ETH address if you want kind of a name associated with it. But, as a collector name, it's probably not going to, it might be your ETH address. It might be something different. And you're suddenly going around collecting and being like, oh, wow, this is my personality as a collector. And I think a lot of people are going to experience that. And the question is then, how does it change the way in which they interact, with other people online? Do they suddenly want to embrace fully an online persona? Do they create secondary accounts? And I think Gen Z will do this a lot. The question is,
Completely agree.
will other generations embrace that? And I think it's a set of, it's a behavior that's very new and not terribly beneficial for people who have established a persona that is aligned with their first name and last name and digital presence and things like that. To start again and do this could be fun for people, but and I think in some circumstances it's really to share maybe beliefs that they couldn't share otherwise, or it doesn't convey a lot of tangible benefits unless you're really starting fresh, right? So
it's interesting. And I look at now, there's greater anon people, especially in the digital asset community on Twitter, where, CryptoPunk 6529, and they're able to say things that probably they prefer to be anonymous. And in some ways, I'm a little jealous. I mean, I could go ahead and do it too. And you could be very open. It may be something that people may find off-putting politically. I mean, it's a sensitive topic, but let's bring it up. And this, I'm not going to say it allows you to hide behind, quote unquote, an avatar or an NFT style JPEG image. Maybe you're actually able to bring up discussions that need to be discussed. But unfortunately, much in society looks at you from a strange perspective if you discuss some of these topics that can be very, very sensitive. And perhaps the anon, the avatar, gives you a voice that it's hard for you to do in reality, especially if you're a little bit older, working in corporate America, and you're somewhat being monitored, I guess you could say, in your traditional social media.
Well, I think in many ways, anon is a reaction to cancel culture.
Yes, for sure.
And I, as a mental health advocate and someone who's very active in the private sector, both in terms of investing, running my company and the like, I am out there in the open. I need to be very cautious with what I say. And I am very comfortable saying with what I say because I tend to wear my heart on my sleeve and it's all very aligned. So I don't have issues with that. But, if I were in a situation, I'm speaking of hypotheticals here. If I were in a situation, I shared some radical view around something or had maybe radical views, but had a very specific view that could be contentious, then, the anon persona is valuable for me because I can then go ahead and, take on this personality that can be canceled or what have you, but it's a burner account. It can go away and it doesn't affect me personally. That said, that's an edge case. I think in many situations, it's just people, at least say with NFT collecting and crypto and things like that, often it's a case where people can share extreme views around decentralization and being, NFT maximalist and all these things that ultimately is a radical view, but it's not a radical view like a politically radical view. It's not something that it's just an opportunity to take on a persona that's very valuable because it leads to other people being attracted to what you're saying and doing. But, for someone to go out and say this, it puts them at risk because, things could crater, a collection could go under, it could, all these different things could happen. And then it's your personal reputation, not your persona's reputation on the line.
Yeah, no, who would have thought we would have had these kind of conversations probably a year or two ago? But that's how rapidly, not just from a societal perspective, but a lot of my people are investors, and why I do cover things in the digital asset ecosystem, because this is the now and the future. Are we going to have a bear market? You bet you. It's probably going to come up at some point next year. But then we could have nirvanas that happen after that. There will be tremendous growth in areas like crypto, like NFTs, like DeFi, DAOs within that, and the Metaverse. There'll be ups and downs. There'll be winners and losers. There are in everything. And I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know who those are going to be, both on the winning and losing side per se. It's an exciting time and also a little scary. But I would say, from an investor's perspective, if you are possibly due to your age bias, and I know I used to be part of that club, uh, ignoring the reality. We don't go from analog to digital back to analog. We're marching forward, whether governments and big corporations like it. Oh, they'll impact it through regulation, they'll tax it, they'll have some battles they win. But long term, this cat's out of the bag. From an investing perspective, if you don't want to get left behind, you got to educate yourself, and you at least have to dip your toe in the water strategically and probably begin to increase that carefully over time. I don't think we want to get into a deep investment discussion today, but I would love to hear your commentary on that.
Yeah, well, I'm a decentralized capitalism maximalist, plain and simple. I'll say it. No, I'm a firm believer that existing market structures or classical market structures, even through the advent of retail investing platforms and the like, making it far easier than it's been to invest in the past. It's classical market structures are not appealing to younger generations. They're just not in the same way because a lot of Gen Z and the like feel that they have been disenfranchised in many different ways. And so, it's so much more empowering to build something or be part of a community that builds something that you can invest in that generates value, right? And, that is appealing for people in Gen Z and, Gen Alpha, I'll call out, which to my understanding is people 18 years and younger. Yes. These people, Gen Alpha is crypto native. They will know nothing but a crypto and now enabled world. And, I'm a firm believer in portfolio allocation theory, right? You create a diversified portfolio. It's weighted to be risk mitigated. You want to ensure, you want to seek alpha, but you also want to have, you want to protect your value and you understand value at risk and all these different considerations. That type of portfolio allocation is no longer bond, equity, private equity, startups, what have you, and the like. And then 5% crypto, 10%. That's how we think about it with, the classic
traditionalist,
traditional balanced approach. The way in which Gen Z is thinking about it, and I have conversations with young investors every day, the way in which you're thinking about it, and they've made money in crypto because people have made $1 million for $1,000 investment, right? 18 months ago. Not to say that that's the norm. I do not want to say that's the norm. I need to be specific around that, but just people have. They're thinking about portfolio allocation as, 1/3 startup investment, 1/3 DeFi staking, 1/3 NFT. It's just, they're thinking about how they're diversifying portfolio, and that's, the metaverse diversification, that's probably, a bit of a, that's a bit of a logic jump relating, metaverse to that type of diversification. But the point I'm trying to make is the way in which people are thinking about diversifying, if they're involved with crypto from the onset, is thinking about market investment, classical market investments is a very small part of their portfolio balancing. So, it's interesting because it creates a lot of volatility. And also people's relation, you have a wallet filled with 1,000 ETH. That doesn't feel like $3.8 million, right? That feels different than $3.8 million. I'm not saying that I don't have a wallet filled with 1,000 ETH, but the way in which that capital is allocated is a lot quicker than, say, $3.8 million.
For sure. We did a survey because I'm into these issues and next gen issues or rising generation, I can't tell you how many under 21-year-olds that are from successful families. Let's go with that. Like, they start when they're able to at like a Robinhood account. And of course, it's Tesla or something like that. And they kind of give up on that. And they really move very actively exactly what you just said. Their version of allocation would be what you said. It would be a little bit more concentrated relative in 3 or 4 buckets. Now, again, everyone looks like a genius the last 16, 18 months because things are going up. I try to educate. I'm extremely interested in this community and I'm pretty fluid in it and have become very active in it, but nothing goes up forever. And it still is very nascent. The store of value, lots of volatility. But I do agree, over a 5 or 10-year window, it better be a part of your portfolio. And for those with time on their side, the young ones, perhaps even a greater percentage. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of this going on, and you just have to accept it. But yeah, their version of allocation is so different. Now, as a more traditional, or I used to be a more traditional investor, where that would scare me a little bit is a lot of what I'm used to in maybe real estate or this or that. If this massive generation coming up is just not going to be into it, it's going to be harder for me to extract value in it. And therefore, it may be a lagging asset class, the legacy system that I'm active in, and I'm falling behind because I'm not active in the digital asset ecosystem. And that goes to my whole point about that would probably be a correct assumption. Now it's up to you through resources, perhaps someone, to be educated about it so you could think for yourself and make a more informed decision.
Yeah. You bring up a great point. There are some developments that I think are very promising, but also, when you talk about crypto treasuries and stable coins and things like that, it's circumstantially speaking, some are on very stable ground and some are on not so stable ground, and it's hard to discern which is which. And
yes, sometimes it is.
And as a direct result of that, the concern that I have is that people finally get acclimated to crypto as an asset allocation as part of their portfolio, and then they're at risk of some sort of market event, a black swan crypto event. I'm not talking about kind of the, potential bear market in the classical market, the Dow or something, but a black swan crypto event, which we're very much at risk of in the next 2 years, right? But the question is then, okay, let's say a well-known coin dumps, or Tether is determined to be insolvent. I'm just saying, that's a hypothetical. As a direct result of that, or there's some government crackdown or investigation around, these different, these different protocols, then what you have is, a breakdown of trust. So the question is, how can we continue to generate value and belief in the ecosystem and work out how we can, be mindful of where the risk lies and try to balance out and allocate accordingly? Because, I worry about concentration in certain crypto classes because it seems almost too good to be true, right?
Yeah. I hear you and share some of your concerns and try to educate from my audience that this is not always going to go like that. I think there'll be a point next year where it'll very much go like that, but I'm going to make the argument, depending on your goals and time horizon, that could be a great time again to be educated, to get in at a great price and make some decisions that could be dynastic over the next couple of years, but you have to be able to understand it and make strategic decisions. I do agree with you about some of your concerns. I'm not going to mention names. And here's how I think, unfortunately, it's not a positive, how that could play out. That coupled with a variety of factors leading to what the industry calls a crypto winter or bear market will likely lead to the government looking to want to have more regulation. We need to protect the people. And then that causes concern of the on-ramps and off-ramps in these investments perhaps being more centralized than we would like. I think there will likely be some wins the government has, but I think the community has grown very big and very strong and very global. And I think there'll be compromises. And again, we will be at a point when people in very key decision-making and political authority are going to be the kind of people who are very native in the kind of things we're talking about. So possibly some things could be reversed that were negative that may come on in the next couple of years. This is a crystal ball. I don't know. I'm just trying to make some educated assumptions.
Yeah. And look, when I'm talking stable coins and the like, I'm speaking hypotheticals, but the fact of the matter is we need more educated crypto enthusiasts, crypto maximalists, what have you, in the public sector educating other people. Because a large part of what I'm seeing in on the regulatory side of things is people just trying to figure out what's going on because things are moving so fast, and so I think it's really a necessity for us to really seek to figure out how people can be educated on the policy side of things around what's pragmatic and practical. It doesn't just relate to taxation. It involves like how can you invest in the community? How can you educate people? How can you establish more protections for things like fraud and the like, which is a major issue. And I would say in terms of crypto competency in, say, Congress or the like, it's probably less than 5%, maybe less, of people who really understand what's going on. And that number needs to be boosted simply because what's going to happen is there's going to be a situation where people are like, oh, something tanks or there's some sort of event. And then it's like, oh, we got to crack down. There has to be more regulation, things like that. And actually, what needs to be happening to preempt that is, hey, we need constructive dialogue and education around what's actually going on. And I believe it really needs to tie to mental health. There is a through line here, by the way.
Yeah.
Around the fact of, about 70% of people have some sort of relationship between mental health and their financial situation. 70% of people. And as a direct result of that, if we're talking about establishing new ways to store value, new forms of utility, transformational, new forms of governments, transformational in so many different ways. I said governance, not new forms of government, by the way. I just want to be clear on that. But, people can get excited about something, especially when it just generates value. And then you see people invest at the top or close to the top or something like that. And then suddenly, some sort of hyped currency or like could just absolutely dump, and it freaks people out, and they need to, I worry the risk of potentially a bear market, potentially really cooling enthusiasm for the space. And I'm so excited about how transformative the technology is. There are applications in mental health care and healthcare, by the way, that will blow your mind. The opportunities, and we're working on it with my company. We're thinking through opportunities to establish not only smart contracts, but create community-oriented ownership models around telehealth and the like that are completely unprecedented. And that's going to become more of the norm. It just generates so much value for people on the whole. And if you invest in that early, it's not like this is something over a 10-year horizon where you see, a massive accretion of value, you see this happen in 3 years. You see this happen less. And of course, you know, there's volatility associated with that. I need to be very pragmatic and establish a disclaimer around this. Yes, we're seeing more wealth generation in as short amount of time as possibly ever. But the little asterisk is we're also seeing more volatility than we've ever seen, I think, in the history of capitalism.
Actually, on that note, as we begin to take it somewhat to the home stretch, I want to be respectful of your time. You again beat me to the punch. I was going to ask in terms of, because it is part of my title, what are you doing in the world of the things we're talking about? Advent of AI, technology, 5G, digital assets, the metaverse, and how does that intertwine relative to mental health? You mentioned a couple of different things. If you could expound a little more.
Well, we're very interested at my company around Web3 applications. So there's a couple that are just really bleeding edge applications that we're just starting to scratch the surface of. One are smart contracts. You can create incentive models around triggers, whether it's with health data, say walking 10,000 steps leads to an incentive or rebate or any number of opportunities around delivering a reward system. You can do the same thing with heart rate variability, HRV. You can measure cortisol if you're talking about a medical environment. And for reduced cortisol levels, you can create rewards and systems. So we're looking at smart contracts as a means to establish rewards for a telehealth model. Extending from that, you can apply NFTs in very creative ways. One thing I'm very excited about is actually leveraging non-fungible tokens for education. So if you have a piece of content or a course that's completed, you can distribute a pass. Say, hey, you've completed this. And then all it takes is an algorithm to pick up that someone's completed that. And then it can create all sorts of opportunities and access. So we're actually going to be applying that model for educating people around neurotransmitter health and mental health, specifically things like nutritional psychiatry, fitness routines to manage mental health, things like that. The token model is something that we are actually exploring applying to a community ownership model for a telehealth platform. This is something that could enable providers of healthcare or telepsychiatry providers to join in the value generation as they're applying treatment. Now, mind you, there are considerations like HIPAA compliance and things like that that need to be factored in, but there are new modalities that will enable groups of communities getting together to generate value for service or products or things like that in very meaningful and material ways while they contribute to the governance of an organization. I mean, it's just unprecedented, the level of opportunity around collaboration, community ownership, and then also leveraging things like AI and machine learning for integrated automation. You can apply, say, smart contracts. Let's say, for instance, I'm just using one use case that we're looking into. You do 10,000 steps, your Apple Watch reads it, or your smart tracker, what have you, reads it. As a result of that, it triggers rewards that ultimately enable you to get discounts in your premium and the like. That will take a long time to integrate, but this is an example. As a direct result of that, you get more comfortable with sharing certain data that can then you can then apply a learning layer around and understand a baseline of what someone's baseline mood is, how different inputs of data affect that baseline mood, and then create behavioral insights and recommendations through things like sentiment analysis and I mean, all sorts of different algorithmic analysis methodologies, but Bayesian analysis, neural networks, hybrid models, what have you.
Sure.
You can then provide insights and recommendations saying, hey, you're doing this over the course of the day and it's impacting your mood like this, you're 20% as happy and 20% more stressed when you do these certain things. Just do these quick changes and you can change the way in which you experience well-being and happiness throughout the day. And then you create this virtuous loop around how you can then create bigger gates that ultimately lead to better triggers, all while, say, participating in a telehealth or telepsychiatry relationship, which in turn is transacted on using tokens that you might own, that your provider might own, that generates value for everybody involved. It's also a feeless model. We don't need a take rate as a company because it generates value for the token on a whole.
Wow, that sounds amazing. As that progresses, we'd certainly love to have you on again and talk about kind of the interactivity of mental health awareness and technology and the advancements in 6 months as you see in what you're doing and what others are doing are coming along. I'll make 1 or 2 very quick announcements. Again, this podcast, this video is for education from our opinion at this point in time, which may change, and entertainment perspective. These are serious issues that we talked about today, from mental health, where you should absolutely seek a professional's guidance. You should never feel any stigma in doing so. You should do so sooner rather than later, and don't make any decision relative to your health, whether physical or mental, without the guidance of professionals that know specifically and understand you and can give you the best guidance. And from an investing perspective, similar. It was an opinionated, entertainment, engaging opportunity of our discussion. Everyone has their own situation, and you need to make your own decision. When you invest, there is something that could happen. We hope it doesn't, but you could lose your money. So you need to be very careful and make very strategic decisions specific to you. Zach, it's been incredible. For those that would like to learn more about your company and companies and what you spoke about, is there a website or a way to connect, a Twitter handle? What's the best way to interact?
Sure, yeah. Company website is youcanpym.com, youcampym.com. You can reach out to me through email, zak@youcanpym.com. Yeah, please feel free to reach out on Twitter @Zach Williams, ZAK Williams. Mm-hmm. And I'm on the other socials as well.
That's great. Although not as good as seeing you in person like we did a couple of years ago, but we're getting more used to the Zoom world now. But hopefully I'll have a chance to see you in person soon as well. We have lots of things on digital assets to compare notes about. So that'll be a lot of fun, and look forward to hearing about all the things you're working on in good to society and mental health as well. That will be great. Everyone, I'm Angelo Robles, host of the Angelo Robles podcast and the founder of Family Office Association. Check us out, Family Office Association. There is value in being a member. Perhaps that's something you would like to learn more about. And I'm very active on social media. Since we're on a Twitter kick today, I'm very simple. I'm @Family Office. And that also happens to be our page, is that the right word, on YouTube, where a lot of our videos make it up. Just simply go to Family Office on YouTube, subscribe, it's all free. And hopefully you'll enjoy the content that we provide. Again, Zach, it's been great. I look forward to the next time.
Such a pleasure. Talk to you soon.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.